Okay, good morning everyone. Our topic for today is linear domain and range. So for our first example, you have the graph here. We are now going to analyze and discuss what the domain is and the range is. So domain is defined as all the x values of a graph. The range, all the y values. So how will that look like in this example? Okay, so if we look at the domain here, the domain are all these x values. So what we are marking is the left of the graph to the right of the graph. Why? Because when I mark the left, it gives me the x value. And when I mark the right, it gives me the highest x value. So it looks to me like this starts at -2 and this ends at +2. So that is your range, you think. However, because of the arrow, it tells you that this is not going to stop on the -2 and will stop here on the +2. What it's going to do is it's going to go to -infinity, and to your right is +infinity. So your domain is going to look like -infinity to +infinity, and the reason is because to my left is an arrow and to my right is also an arrow. So for infinity, on the interval notation, we are going to use parentheses. Parentheses means that it's not going to ever end. So for infinity, once again, we are going to be using parentheses. How about the range? Let's look at the range. The range are all the y values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the bottom to the top. So if I mark the bottom, it seems to me like your range is going to start with -1 and will end somewhere at a +2.5 right there. However, because of the arrow and the arrow, we cannot say that it starts at -1 because it will go down and move towards infinity. Therefore, your range will also be -infinity up to +infinity, and this is the notation that we're going to be using if we want it to be the interval notation. So this is called interval notation. Okay. Sorry for that space, but yeah, that is called interval notation. So now, let us still do domain and range, but this time, let us use the inequality notation. So how does inequality notation look like? The inequality notation would look like this. So for domain, it starts with an x, and this is going to always point to your left. It will not ever going to change. And this is going to be arranged from least to greatest. And your least number on your left is a -infinity, and to the right is a +infinity. Will you put an equal sign at the bottom? The answer is no. No equal sign because infinity will never equal a number because it is infinity. So now let's look at the range. Range is bottom to top. So let's look at the bottom. Again, it looks like it starts at -1. However, it really is in the -infinity. So you start with the y. And again, this always points to your left. And this is going to be -infinity up to +infinity. So this type of notation is called the inequality notation because it uses the inequality symbol. So how do we read this? This is read as x is greater than -infinity but less than +infinity. So let's look at this and read it. This is read as y is greater than -infinity but is less than +infinity. Okay, the next type of notation is called the set builder notation, and I'm going to build this up as we go along. So how will you do this in set builder notation? Well, set builder notation is going to look like this. The domain are all the x values such that x is an element of set of all real numbers. Okay, so I know that's intense, so let's read this again. Your domain are all the x's such that x is an element of all real numbers. So how will that look like for the range? The range would look like this. Range are all the y values such that y is an element of all real numbers. Okay? And this one is called the set builder notation. So once again, this is called the set builder notation. Okay, so we are on example number 2, and how will we do the domain and range here? So again, domain, all the x values. So I'm marking my left to right because this is your x-axis. My left seems to be a -2 and my right is a +2, so that could be your range. However, if I look at this tip of the line, it is an arrow. An arrow always points to infinity. Also, this is an arrow, so I cannot use -2 and +2 in this case. I must use the negative infinity, positive infinity for my domain. Now let's look at the range. The range is, again, all the y values, so bottom to top. It looks to me like my bottom, my graph ends at -2 and my top ends with a 2. That could be my range. However, when I look at this tip right here, it's an arrow, and this tip at the very top is also an arrow. Because of that, my range has to be negative infinity up to positive infinity. And again, that is interval notation right there. Okay, so for the domain of this example, we are going to use now, so this is the interval notation. I'm now going to use the inequality notation, which is read as the domain is dx greater than negative infinity but less than positive infinity. No equal sign because infinity is not ever going to be equal. So let's look at the range. Y greater than negative infinity but less than positive infinity. And again, this is the inequality notation because it uses the inequality symbol. So now we go to the set builder notation, and it's going to be read as the domain are all the x values such that x is an element of all real numbers. On here, you're going to say that the range are all the y values such that y is an element of all real numbers. All right, example number 3 is just merely a horizontal line. So how do we get the domain? Once again, all the x values, so I mark my left to right. It looks to me that my left is at -2 and my right is at +2. However, when I look at the endpoints of my line, they are arrows. Because they are arrows, I'm not going to say that my domain is negative infinity to positive infinity, which is gonna be x greater than negative infinity but less than positive infinity. Again, no equal sign because infinity is not ever gonna be equal. In the set builder notation, this is gonna be read as my domain are all the x values such that x is an element of all real numbers. Okay, interesting. So we now go to our range. Guys, range are all the y values, so we look at top to bottom. However, if you look at this, there's no top, there's no bottom. It's just an exact number of +1. Because it's an exact number of +1, that is all your range is. +1. So how are we going to write that? You're going to use this bar, and you're going to say that it's +1. And that is how you're going, this is the way to do it for interval notation. For the inequality notation, it's not inequality, it's equality. So you're going to say y is equal to 1. And for the set builder, it's just going to be that the domain, I'm sorry, that the range is the y value such that y is equal to 1. That's all you're going to do. My fourth example is a vertical line. So don't forget to put your x and y axis all the time you're labeling. Okay, let's go to the domain. Domain are all the x values, so you look at left to right. But look at the left to right of this graph just to emphasize, okay? So that's my left, this is my right. It's one number, guys. So because it's one number, you're going to name your domain as -2, whatever that number is. And you're going to use the brackets this time because it's an exact value of just one number, which is -2. For your inequality, it will become an equality notation, which is x is equal to -2 because it's equal to -2. And then for your set builder, you're going to say that it's the set of all x's such that your x is equal to -2. All right. Now let us go to the range. The range are all the y values, and this line is, if I mark the bottom, it looks to me like the beginning point or the lowest point on the y is a -2, and the highest point on the y is a +3. Those could be your range. However, if I look at the endpoints, they are arrows. Because they are arrows, my range now becomes -infinity to +infinity for my interval notation. My inequality notation would look like y is greater than -infinity but is less than +infinity. For my set builder, it's going to be the set of all y's such that y is an element of all real numbers. Let us now move on to our last and final example. This time, my example is a line segment with endpoints that are no longer arrows. So let's look at this. For the domain, all the x values, so you look at left to right. So this is a -2 and it has a shaded circle, a +2 and it has an open circle. So how will you do that for this interval notation is going to be -2. My bad, that is a shaded one, so it has to be bracket, comma, +2, and a parentheses because it is a circle. All right, so how will it look like with the inequality notation? X greater than or equal to -2, y equal, because it's shaded, less than 2, no equal sign because it is open circle. So how will that look like for set builder? Set of all x's such that you're just going to copy this down. X is greater than or equal to -2 but is less than 2. And then you close it like that. All right, wonderful. So now we go to range. So range is all the y values. So this is your x, this is your y. So I look at the bottom and I look at the top. So my bottom is a -1 and my top is a 2. My -1 is a shaded circle, so it's got to be -1 bracket, comma, +2 parentheses. For my set builder, for my inequality notation, it's going to be y less than or equal to -1 because it is shaded, but not greater than or equal to -1, and then less than +2. No equal sign because it is an open circle. So now let's just finish this. For my set builder, it's now gonna look like set of all y's such that, copy this down, your y is greater than or equal to -1 but is less than 2.